Well, hello everybody. Welcome or welcome back, depending on whether this is your first video or you've seen some of the other ones in the series. My name is Dr. Bruce Faske. I'm the Associate Professor of Trombone at Arkansas State University, and today I'm here to talk to you about Bordner Etude number 34 on page 18. This etude is one of the more lyrical selections from this set of 5 etudes. We're dealing with the key of A flat major, and we're dealing with an interesting mix of styles. Often we have music that starts out bold and bravado in style, and the middle contrasting section is more lyrical and sweet, and then maybe a return to that bold bravado style. This etude is sort of the inversion of that. This one starts more lyrical at a comfortable tempo with some more slurring and more connected notes. And then we have a piumoso section in the middle with some accents. And then we sort of return to that more relaxed, comfortable, sweet type of playing about halfway through, and it sort of fades away. So this etude is the opposite of many other etudes in this set. And I think it's really important to single this etude out for that reason, because there's a good chance if I'm a judge and I have to pick repertoire for you to play on your audition, there's a lot of things that I can learn about each auditioning trombonist who plays this etude that I can't learn from some of the other etudes that are more simplistic in their stylistic approach. So as you're going through these, this is one that I would make sure that you don't, I wouldn't bet on an etude being chosen or not chosen. Well, I guess what I should say is, don't play the game of they're not going to pick this one, because this one is a prime candidate to be chosen because it's full of so much stuff. And hopefully I can help you figure out a lot of that stuff today, and we can come up with a solution for how to work on this material and ultimately how to have a great performance of the material. So if we do what we've done on all of the other music, we're going to start at the top left, and we're going to check out the beginning, and we're going to map this out a little bit. So if I look here at the beginning, it's bass clef, so we are dealing with the trombone book. Just to make sure, as I've said before, there are other instruments that have covers that look just like this book's cover, and it wouldn't be the first time that someone made a copy out of the wrong book that had the right etude number, and it turned out to not be the correct etude. So we're looking at number 34, page 18. It's the bottom etude of the two. Bass clef, 4 flats, common time, which is another way of printing 4/4 time. 4 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. And we're dealing with andante and a first dotted quarter note A flat at the top of the bass clef staff. Now, when I was talking about how this music at the beginning is more lyrical as opposed to normally it's more fanfare-ish at the beginning with a more contrasting, gentle center section, this one is the swap of that, or the opposite of that. So I'm going to try to demonstrate this opening section for you so that you can sort of delineate how these sections work. And that's, to me, the opening section of this etude. It's about a line and 3 measures long. And then the 2/8 notes that finish out the bar where I just stopped, they have accents on them. And the piumoso in this next section makes those 2 notes part of what follows rather than belong to the notes that happen at the end of the previous section. Does that make sense? The new section doesn't start on the bar line. It starts with those 2/8 notes as a pickup into the new section. So for now, we're just going to concern ourselves with these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, almost 8 measures worth of music. Now you'll notice here that it's not like some books where the line for the legato is more of a phrase marking that shows 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 measures worth of legato playing all happening in a row. This is a little bit more fragmented. Now, what that doesn't mean is that we should shorten any of the notes. It simply means that the notes should have a discernible articulation at the beginning, unless they have the specific slur. Now, I'm going to get into another video where I talk about legato technique and all of those things, but suffice it to say that even though these notes are not all marked with the same phrase mark, which would indicate legato, we should still have a general lyricism, musical line, and line comes from connection, and connection comes from what we do with the back end of the note. Not the articulation of the note, but the follow through, the remainder of the note, the part that butts up to the beginning of the next note. So if I take this opening section, what I think we should all play under one breath, it's about a measure and a half worth of music. And then I would breathe before these last 3/8 notes. And these last 3/8 notes of measure 2 should lead into measure 3. They should be a pickup note or a pickup gesture before the next downbeat. And then I would breathe again before the A natural, because the A natural is a pickup note for the next measure in the next phrase. So, in almost 8 measures worth of playing, we're breathing a few times, but we're breathing in a pre-planned way. We're taking our pencil, or in my case an Apple pencil, and we're marking in the music where we're going to breathe. And we want to breathe in places that allow our lungs to be full so that we can actually play the phrases. But then we also want to breathe in places that make sense musically. And it's so easy to allow what some would call the biological imperative of breathing, meaning the part of the breathing that happens when you hold your breath underwater in a pool for a long, long time and you feel that burn of the lungs and the body is saying, no matter what, I have to take a breath. If we only let that be the reason that we breathe, like when we physically need to, then we're not always going to be making the best musical choices. And so I prefer to breathe a little sooner rather than a little bit later, because I have nothing to prove with my breathing in terms of breath capacity or anything like that. That doesn't make me a better musician because I can hold my phrases out longer. Sometimes you're given what you're given in terms of your lung power or your lung capacity, and you make the best use of it that you can. And sometimes the best use is breathing a little sooner when there's still some more air left in the lungs. I never want to get all the way down to empty before I breathe. In the same way, if you've ever taken a balloon out of a package, you go to the store and you buy some balloons for a party, and you're going to blow that balloon up. Isn't it always easier to blow the balloon up after it's stretched out a little bit? Well, our lungs are very similar. If our lungs are completely empty, and they're never completely empty, but for what they feel like in our chest cavity, they're harder to fill up. And so I find that if I have some left, some call it the red zone, the last 20 or 30% of what's left in the lungs, if I stay out of the red zone, I'm going to have better breathing. I'm going to be able to move more air. And guess what? My phrases are going to respond accordingly. So we have that opening section. We're dealing with 4 flats, but we have a D natural. I'm looking here to see if there's any other places where we have to deal with the D flat. Make sure that you play the D flat in measure 3 on the downbeat of 3. In the second line, first measure, D flat on the upbeat of 1. Second line, second measure, D flat on the upbeat of 2 and the upbeat of 3. And then on the third measure of the second line, on the downbeat of 1, we have a D flat. So make sure you catch those. But then also play D natural where that's marked as well. The reason that both of those exist, there's some music theory that goes along with that I don't want to get into on this particular video, but I might take some time to make another video talking about musical expression and the use of accidentals and phrases. So after we play that opening section, the almost 8 measures worth, we have a stylistic change. We go from andante, which is sort of walking speed, moderate tempo, nothing particularly drastic slow or fast, just a comfortable walking pace. And then we have this section, forte, halfway through the second line, that's also marked più mosso, more motion, faster. So whatever tempo you choose at the beginning, kick it up a notch or two in the più mosso section. It's pretty straightforward. Now, I don't think that it needs to be a specific metronome marking faster. I don't think that anyone's going to be sitting back with a metronome and tapping to make sure that it's 8 clicks faster or 10 clicks faster. But I want it to be noticeable enough to anyone who's listening to you play that they know that you know that there's a change there that needs to be made. You want it to be overt, like stage makeup if you're in a theater production. You want the people in the back row of the theater to be able to see the expression of your face and the makeup that you have on to make your character more complete. You do the same thing with exaggeration in music, the same way theater makeup is exaggerated versions of a normal face. So as I get into this più mosso section, here's maybe how I might handle that. I'm going to play a couple bars before so you can hear the change. So did you see what I did there? It started to move. And you can really tell the difference when I get to the quarter notes. Now, those quarter notes are all accented, but I don't know if that necessarily needs to mean accented and short. Because one of the risks that we take when we shorten quarter notes that are accented is we compress them. And because we're playing a note that takes up less time, it's really easy for the next note to be coming in too soon rather than waiting long enough to put that note right where it's supposed to go. It's really easy to push them together like you're pushing together books on a bookcase to take out all the slack so that they stand up straight. We don't want to compress those notes in the same way. We want to give them their full space. Even though we're playing faster, we want to make sure that whatever tempo we choose, we set up with the eighth notes and then we stay consistent with that in this più mosso section. Also, the slurs are gone. So stylistically, for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-ish bars plus a pickup, we have a punchier style without slurs. So we want to make sure that we handle the contrast in those two ways. A slightly faster tempo, more motion, più mosso, and a more pointed, articulated, forceful articulation sort of style. So yeah, let me try that again. I'm going to connect all this together, again, starting a few bars before so you can hear the difference. And that's the middle section. Now, there's a couple of sneaky things that happen towards the end before the return to the mezzo forte a tempo setting at the end of the third line. What I'm talking about specifically is the third line of music, 1, 2, 3, fourth measure. You see we have that D natural that shows up. And that D natural happens on the downbeat of 1. Then we have A flat on beat 2 of that bar, F on beat 3. Then we have a C natural, and the D natural carries through from the beginning of the measure. It's not D flat yet. It's still D natural. If I play it wrong, it sounds like this. It's a subtle change, but to me it doesn't quite sound right because it's not setting up the return to that opening material. So if I play it correctly, I have to make sure that D natural carries through. And that's a perfect place for that upbeat of 4 D natural to play in flat fourth between two third position notes. C in third, D in flat fourth, E flat in third, rather than going back and forth from first to third. Now, we have a return to the opening material, which is a lot like the beginning, with always it's going to be slightly different, because if it was the exact same thing, it would never end. It would just lead into the middle section again, and then we'd go back to that, and it would lead, and there's nowhere to close that loop. So the music has to be slightly different. And I think it's really important to know how it's the same, and to know specifically where the change happens. Where does this music stop sounding like the beginning? Where could I literally say that the music looks different than it did in the first portion? So I'm going to start after the E flat half note at the end of the third line, so that you can hear this closing section. Now, I took a little bit of poetic license at the end there. I did a slight slowdown going into the last measure, and yes, it's not marked. And I'm sure that someone out there would say that it's a bad idea to do that if it's not marked. But frankly, to me, it's already getting softer as we go through, and it just kind of makes sense musically to slow down in that last little bit. If you wanted to do it without the slowdown, it would sound like this. And then make sure that you play the last note full value, 4 full beats. I would actually go as far as to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and cut off on 5. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and cut off on the second 1. So it's a pretty straightforward etude. There's a lot going on, but the breathing in the second half is very similar to what we did in the first half. In the middle section that's punchier and faster, I think it's important essentially to not breathe on bar lines. There's a good idea to breathe before the 8th note figures. If you have 2 notes on beat 4, second to last measure, the second line after the E flat half note before the 8th notes is a good place to breathe. You can breathe again on the first measure of the third line after the half note F. You can breathe again in the half note after the half note F in the third measure of the third line. So be specific, on paper, on purpose. Mark all of your breaths to make sure you know where you're going to breathe. That way when you get nervous in the audition room, which we all get nervous in the audition room, you have a plan, and that plan can serve you when you're nervous. So I hope this helps. This is another video in the series. We're getting close to being done with these, but then I'm going to start diving in with some new ideas about some specific techniques related to playing the trombone that I think you're going to enjoy. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.